Welcome to part 2 of our discussion about the engineering profession. So today I want to talk to you about engineering as a career as well as how to become an engineer. So let's begin with the first topic, which is engineering as a career. There are 4 features here that I'm going to talk about, and feature number 1 that should motivate you to consider engineering as a career is that it's a very rewarding career. What is shown out here in this table is the average salary that a fresh graduate who's just completed his or her degree and goes out into the into the workforce earns as they start out. And what you will notice is that engineering is one of the highest paid disciplines in terms of an average across all the types of jobs from the various disciplines. So that's a good starting point. But more importantly, engineers are usually in a situation where they are working to solve problems which require creativity. And when you are being creative, it correlates with having a very high job satisfaction, especially when being creative also comes with being paid well. And so job satisfaction is one of the most important reasons for why engineering is a very rewarding career. The second item is that being an engineer is like having a key to open many doors. What I want you to focus on is on the list of names in the top half of this table here. Jimmy Carter, Alfred Hitchcock, Herbie Hancock, Frank Capra. If you look at these 4 names, you would not necessarily associate them with engineering. President Carter is famous because he became a president of the United States. Alfred Hitchcock is very well known because he's a famous film director and producer. Herbie Hancock is a famous jazz musician. Frank Capra is another famous American film director. And all of these were actually people who had an engineering undergraduate degree. Likewise, if you look through the remaining names here, you will see many names that some of which are familiar, maybe like Bill Nye, the science guy. But most of the other names might not seem familiar to you right now, but these are all people who have made major contributions to our life as we know it. Katherine Johnson is a well-known NASA computer scientist, or rather NASA computer, an engineer, because she was involved with making computations of space flight in the early days of NASA. So the point here is that starting out with an engineering degree also gives you the key to doing whatever you want to do. Yeah. Number 3 is that engineering is a field in which you can see people doing amazing things, having come from many different backgrounds. The 6 examples you see out in front of you are people who have gone through severe hardships and have made major contributions to the fields of engineering. Mary Jackson and Katherine Johnson, these are 2 African American women who have made who contributed to the NASA's successful launch of space flights in the early days of space exploration. They worked as engineers and computer scientists doing sophisticated calculations of space flight. Ellen Ochoa is an electrical engineer. She's the first Hispanic woman astronaut, and she was one of the space shuttle pilots, and she's currently also at NASA. Millie Dresselhaus is known as the Queen of Carbon. She passed away in 2020. She was trained as an electrical engineer, but her major contributions came by making many new discoveries in the area of material science. And finally, Hedy Lamarr here, who is a very well-known Hollywood actress, but is less well-known even though she has made stellar contributions in engineering, especially in the field of communication engineering. She did not have a degree in engineering, but she was an inventor and a self-taught engineer, and she worked with scientists at Caltech in Pasadena to come up with inventions that were critical during World War II. So what I would like to convey from here is that for all of you who are thinking about engineering, it's important to have an inspiring role model. And I think you can definitely find a role model that you would like to emulate. But at the same time, it's important to realize that engineering as a field has one big drawback currently, and that is that it is not as diverse as it needs to be. And so increasing diversity in engineering is a big challenge for all of us as engineers and educators, and that's why we are hoping that all of you will become engineers, and also think about the fact that you need to incorporate diversity in your actions as an engineer. Item number 4 is that an engineer can find herself doing a variety of different job functions, whether it has to do with inventing new technologies, whether it has to do with managing a company, whether it is publishing papers through research and development that talk about new discoveries, and so on and so forth. So there are many job functions to choose from, and that's another reason engineering is a very good career choice. As you know, I'm an engineer, but I'm also teaching, and that's my primary passion right now. So teaching is also a very important job function, and one that you can achieve, of course, through an engineering degree. Yeah. So I would like to say that as you start thinking about, what to do, what type of engineering to choose from, here is a quote that I personally like to tell students to think about, and that is to find something that you love and learn to do it so well that you can make a career out of it. This is the words of a famous engineer whose name is Dean Kamen. You might better know him as the inventor of the Segway machine. Here's another item number 5, and that is prestige. You have certainly your financial status will be good, you'll be in a creative job, you'll have many opportunities and many doors that you can open. But also along the way you will realize that engineers are critical to our society. When we think about international competitiveness, our standard of living, national security, personal health, public safety, all of these are driven by innovations in technology that at the back of it are teams of engineers. Right? And if you're not convinced, look at these major innovations from the 20th century. Here's a list of what has been ranked as the top 10 innovations, and as you can see, all of these are ultimately have made our life better, have made our country be powerful, have helped with eliminating certain diseases, helped with keeping our nation strong in times of crisis, and all of these are driven by engineering innovations and by engineers. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a sense of why you might want to choose engineering as a career. So let's go on now to understanding how one can become an engineer. Well, it turns out that there are basically 3 paths. But before I get to that, I wanted to highlight something that is an outcome of a survey that was done by companies, by asking questions to corporations and industry about what is it that they find most lacking in graduates who come and join their jobs. So the top 10 skills that are lacking amongst graduates. As you can see through this list, some of them are things like commercial awareness, communication, and leadership, ability to work in a team, problem solving, and conceptual ability. So these form the first 6 of the 10. And you must be wondering, okay, what about the math and the science? Well, yes, math and science is very important, but as you can see, once you get an undergraduate degree, your knowledge of math and science is going to be pretty good, and so that is not a critical shortfall in terms of the graduates. But what is a critical shortfall are the ones up here: the ability to communicate, the ability to work in teams, the ability to lead, and to really understand whether a product is going to be useful or not, right? And so thinking about that, let's now get back to the original question of how to become an engineer. Well, there are 3 parts, as I said. So the first one is that you earn a bachelor's degree in engineering. If you think back to our first lesson on the definition of engineering, you'll see that part of it is to develop science and math skills, right? And this is what an undergraduate degree will give you. Part 2 is to actually come back to school after a degree that you might have got, let's say in science or in the social sciences, or whatever field, but come back to get a graduate degree in engineering. And that means you can get either a master's or a PhD, and that again gets you back on track to becoming an engineer or working as an engineer. And of course, item number 3, this is part 3, and this is becoming an inventor or an entrepreneur. So as I mentioned to you in an earlier slide, Hedy Lamarr, the famous Hollywood actress, she did not have an engineering degree, but she was an inventor and an innovator. Bill Gates did not complete his undergraduate degree, but as we all know, he went on to found Microsoft, and that's a big company now. And so one can categorize his contribution to the field as being that of engineering, because he created software and he allowed that to become a very successful part of our life. Okay, so hopefully this gives you an idea of what you need to do to become an engineer. Part 1, part 2, or part 3. As of now, most of you are going to be following part 1. But you can always think about part 2 and part 3. So again, to wrap up, make sure you go through the relevant resources, including chapter 2 of the textbook and the supporting lecture slides, and make sure to read up in your spare time the biographies of the famous women engineers that I presented here. Okay, thank you. Look out for any activities that are related to this lesson.